G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players who are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Heff and this week I am joined by the godfather of AFL fantasy, the Warn Dog. How are you, mate?
Hey, good, Heff. Cruising along, mate. We've got a few weeks to go of the season, but we're heading up towards our finals, which is always an exciting time of the year.
We were just chatting about, as content creators, I think they call us these days, how much we're kind of like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of the season and stuff like that.
That's what it is. I think when you start writing down some of the numbers like round 18, that's sounding like it's getting close.
Yeah, I think anytime after about round 12, you know, like you start to kind of feel a bit better about things. So does that mean your Keeper League team's not travelling that well, or how are things going?
Oh, it's actually okay. We're really tight. So we, our Keeper League, I've mentioned to you before as well, we have waivers off in ours. So we do a mid-season draft. And I was actually at that point, which is bad. I was second on the ladder, so it meant our reverse order wasn't great for picking up those guys, you know, the Ned Longs of the league that didn't get drafted for us at the start of the season. But yeah, ended up sort of back there. And in those, must be 3 weeks now since we've had that, I've slipped down to fifth on the ladder. So it is tight though. Between second and seventh, there's one game between us. So it's a very, very tight league. So we'll see how that ends up going. What have we got? 4 weeks to go. 3 weeks to go. Getting down to the nitty gritty. Ours is quite close as well. The top two are probably a game ahead, and then there's 3 and 4 on the same points. I've slid down to third after being top two all year. I've had some. I don't know if you saw my TikTok the other week about my 1 point defeat. Yeah. I had another really bad beat this weekend. I had VC on Cherry and the C on Caldwell. So, like, Cherry was so close to being a fieldable VC, you know, 97 points. I was like, Caldwell will get 100 against Gold Coast. Yeah, that's fine. And then the other guy, I had Max Hall and Zach Guthrie to go with Nick Dacos, captain. End up going down by about 30-odd points. So, yeah, pretty. It's hard when you cop those ones. If you cop two of those types of guys, that's where it does hurt. I went down to Roy, actually, this week, and he's sitting on top of our ladder, so we're all tight behind him, but he's 16 wins. It's an incredible season that he's putting together at the moment.
16 wins, that's huge. Oh, well, yes. Might be hard to catch him there. But
yeah, he's good at choking, though, so we'll see how that ends up.
Well, hopefully for your sake, it does happen. But anyways, we'll get stuck into the show. Trying to kind of strip the show back a bit at the moment. We're back to out of the bye rounds and back to the full 9 games per week. Just trying to probably focus on players that might be available on waiver wires, or any players that are kind of, you know, maybe have a position change or a role change or something that might kind of cause an uptick that you could get a trade in on or something like that before your opponent realizes. But anyway, we'll get stuck into it. So Nick Larkey's the first one, 76 points. He's available on a lot of waiver wires. 5 goals though and it was on one leg after about quarter time. I don't know. Would you be trusting performances like that too often?
Not really. He's the sort of guy that you feel like streaming, although that probably wouldn't have been a game that you would have streamed in anyway going into it. But, yeah, no, not really. Even to that point of 5 goals for 76 is a little bit of a scary sort of line, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. The next one on the list is Aaron Norton. He's been dropped back a little bit as well because he had a putrid score, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago where he barely got over 30 points. The last 2 weeks, he's actually put up okay scores, but it's kind of coincided with Darcy being well held. And like Darcy did put up a good score this week, but for 3 quarters he was held. It was when they had to like restructure to cover Cherry for the last quarter that he actually kind of put on a few extra goals and stuff like that. What's your thoughts? Because like there was a lot of people in the classic space asking me, should I bring in Darcy? And because he was averaging like 92 at the time if you took out his injury affected score or whatever. And my opinion was that like it was a little bit inflated, that average, because he hasn't really played against a lot of good key defenders yet. And just the law of averages on key forwards, you know, like very rarely does one continue to average 90 plus across an entire season. And I think we're starting to see that now. But what's your whole take on the Western Bulldogs forward makeup? And can Aaron Norton kind of keep chipping away at it and put up some respectable scores for us?
He can. I think I've always been a bit of a Norton believer, but the issue with him is probably the Darcy thing. Can that end up being a positive for him? If he's pushing up the ground taking marks, that's what we want to see. But we're going to see that Darcy is just that focal point 90% of the time anyway. So, and why wouldn't you if the bloke can grab the ball from 3.9 metres in the air? That's the sort of thing that we want to get from him, and we'll see that happening. But, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just going to be, again, a streamer sort of dude that you might have with Norton. There's going to be games where he will pop because he does push up the ground. I think that's one thing, and we see him taking marks, and that's another, obviously, positive, what you need to get if you are going to be playing any sort of key forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. The Darcy thing with him is just like, why wouldn't you target the huge guy who can, reach 3 meters in the air over him as well? So I know he just picks up the scraps, I think, and most weeks people are going to struggle to deal with Darcy as well. All right, let's move on to the Carlton versus Collingwood game. Hey, Warnie, just a little question for you. How do you think it would go down with the Carlton faithful if Michael Voss chucked a pair of lolly teeth into his mouth and did a few funny looks at the camera sitting where they're sitting? What do you think would happen?
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. Even to the point, I don't know if you jump on the AFL Fantasy Instagram, we just did a stupid little piss take of that ourselves, actually. So, yeah, no. When I saw that live, watching that in that game, I thought, well, what the hell? He's lost the plot. But it probably actually shows where he's at and where probably Josh Carr is actually. He's the captain of that ship at the moment.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, given that they're only a game behind Port and have a huge percentage, like, and just Michael Voss absolutely copying it from left, right, and centre, it just kind of shows the Victorian bubble versus the SA bubble, I think. But anyway, let's move on to the Carlton versus Collingwood game. Mark Pitnet had 93 points. He's destroying Tom De Koning because De Koning's playing forward. Do you reckon that's going to happen for a few weeks? Because Mackay's about 2 to 4 weeks away, they reckon.
Yeah, so Mackay may not even be there for the season. Like, that's the thing. Yeah. So I think they will continue with that, the dual ruck, because they sort of need to. That's probably the thing. And that's the thing about TDK. And if we're talking keepers as well, like, what is their plan post TDK if that actually ends up happening, if St Kilda keep going with their massive offer? Like, I can't see him staying if that's the dollars that are going to be on the table. So, yeah, it could mean that the Pitbull could actually be an option for you to be grabbing if he is available.
Well, it seems to me like they're prepping, let's play TDK forward, not in the ruck. He can cover Mackay while he's out. If he gets traded at the end of the season, at least we've kind of given a month or so into Pitnet and, let him kind of work his way into our structures and things like that, getting ready for next year. So, yeah, it could be quite grim for the owners over the last few weeks, especially if you've been like a contender all year. Yeah. You might be seeing up a few more 50s and 60s from De Koning going forward.
Which probably helped you get there at the start of the season too with the numbers that he was putting up early on.
Yeah, correct. No, it could be pretty grim. Lockie Cowan, one of my boys, and I think one of your boys too. He's a Tassie bloke, isn't he?
Tassie boy, yep.
That's right.
Cash Cowan.
That's right. 89 points. He just played the right roles. I've always been drawn to him because he's always played the right role as a junior anyway. And he keeps showing glimpses like this. I think early on in the season, he put up a really decent 70 in round one, comes back in the side this week and puts up an 89, plays that halfback role. It's kind of like Newman's, I guess, like, slotting in Newman's missing and whatever, but kind of plays that halfback role. But I was watching him, pretty closely. He got involved on those +6 switches across the back. He got a couple of intercepts when there was a few wayward kicks coming out of forward 50 for Collingwood. What do you reckon with Lockie Cowan? Is there potential there?
Yeah, I think there probably is, and for the future and what Carlton might be doing in the immediate term, I think he probably stays in there and he might be needed, and that's probably about the blokes that they've got available to play those roles. But that's a natural thing for him, that half-back role, and there is that spot there for the Blues, like even to the point of going as a classic owner of Sam Doherty, like it's a bit of a worry. How are they going to what's the right phrase for it? Put him down? Is that almost the thing? Like, is he going to be there for every single round to start with? Does he get some sort of a farewell game? I think he does stay in there, but what they want to be looking towards is, live past Doc doing that, which he wasn't doing that earlier in the season anyway. So it's sort of a bit of a needs type thing. And Cowan is that future, I guess.
Yeah, I sure hope he does stay in because I've just traded him into my team at a very cheap price. But I kind of need him to hold down my last defensive spot. So yeah, hopefully. But it's good to see guys like Cowan coming through and scoring well. On Doc, do you think I guess he kind of touched on it there, but do you think he gets another contract next year? And if he doesn't, to be honest, I think if you're a Doc owner, him not getting a contract next year is better for you than him getting one, because then they might put him on ice or, try some other things back there. Whereas if this is going to be his last 6 weeks, it might be the farewell tour. You know what I mean? What do you think happens with him? Do you think he goes around again, or do you think they get him? Or
Roy's sitting next to me, and Roy will probably punch me if I'm saying Doc's done, because that's what he's been like about any of the content around Doherty at the moment. But I don't know. It's going to be an interesting watch to see where they go with that, because he's obviously a warrior and a hero of the club. But there's been those couple of points this year where he doesn't look like he's himself. And yeah, if Carlton are going to be that team that are taking that next step, or whatever, is it with Doherty? That's the big worry. And so I don't know how long. Well, what have we got? 7 weeks left in the season. He doesn't have a contract for next year.
Nah, hasn't been tabled yet.
Interesting. So, it's going to be a watch. I guess we just have to keep riding it, because obviously he can still score. Like, even no matter where you're looking, he still had an 80-odd last week, and he punched out, a big 130 a couple of weeks ago. So he still has that ability to score in that role, because he's still a cool head in that sort of space.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully he'll hold. Onto the Collingwood side of things. The only one really relevant is Tom Mitchell. Like in the Waiver Wire podcast. And apologies, I forgot to have Lockie Cowan in my Waiver Wire podcast this morning, but you're getting it now in the main show. But Tom Mitchell's another one we've been pumping up on the Waiver Wire podcast for about 6 weeks now. Mm-hmm. Probably not in any way like permanent form. It was more like a case like this, where Steele Sidebottom, it was out ill, and then someone like Tom Mitchell comes back in and puts out and almost scores a 90 for you, 88 points. It's like this is the kind of case point for him that you could have him on your bench and kind of stream him when he does get a game. But like on that, saying that, do you have any faith in him holding him spot, or do you think it's just like a like for like with one of their best 22 out for the week?
Yeah, obviously still Sidebottom is probably the key reason. But then again, they did play Roan Steele on the weekend as well. So that's another one. There might be that body there. But he was good. Like, I think he ticked the things, and he's been ticking it along in the VFL too, like hitting, the probably key numbers of tackles, and still had plenty of the peels. So what you end up with 26 disposals, 3 tackles in there, 5 marks, which is not even a massive Tom Mitchell thing at times too, because of how inside he does get. But yeah, there's not a heap of faith, but for someone that name would just be enough for me to want him there on my bench to send some intimidation into the faces of my opponents.
Yeah, I've got him in one of my leagues. He's been sitting on the bench all week, and I didn't field him this week, actually. I probably should have in the end, but
Collingwood will play earlier games too, so there's probably those looping opportunities with him anyway.
Yeah, that's it. Onto the West Coast versus GWS. You a fan of the 2 Friday night games, or do you hate it?
Oh, if they didn't overlap as much as what they did, I'd love that. I'd love even a 7 o'clock start into a 9 o'clock start, because it's over in Perth. Like, still, that's not, that's a 7 o'clock game in Perth. I'd be all in on that we could be watching double headers like that. Probably not like this though, but I guess that's what we get on Saturday nights every week anyway.
Yeah, I don't know why they don't fixture it better. Like, if you're watching the Collingwood, the majority of the country is watching the Collingwood-Carlton game, right? So, like, why don't play it later, and the people that do want to stay up late and watch footy can do that, and those who don't can just go to bed? I don't think it's really going to affect the television numbers that much, to be honest. Probably gets better because the diehards like us will probably stay up and watch it.
Switch over to it.
Yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, like the only good thing about having the 2 Fridays and 2 Saturdays is Sunday finished a lot earlier, so you could kind of, or for us, we could get stuck into our work a lot earlier, and your live stream's not going, until 11 o'clock at night.
That's a nice thing in it. I don't mind double headers, because it's better for fantasy, because your points are actually ticking over maybe a little faster than normal as well.
Yeah,
it's like
definitely.
Almost a cheat code you got it on fast forward.
As a result, though, didn't get to watch a whole heap of. I probably missed 3 or 4 games this weekend just because of all the ones that were on with each other. And then my missus was at a conference on Saturday, which is always fun. So I was just on parenting duties all day. So missed that one. But onto the West Coast versus GWS. Brady Hoff, he's had the 3 times 80-plus scores now. So that auto qualifies him for too good for the podcast. Do you reckon he, like all season we've seen him put up a good score, then he'll get a 30 the next week, ton up 40, that sort of stuff. He's actually done 3 good scores in a row. So does he hold at this decent rate now, and can he be like a 70 averaging defender for the rest of the year? Or do you think there's just too much risk factor in the West Coast team?
I guess he's ticking along as a best 22 obviously now, and where he is profile-wise. Thing is, what are they going to do with him? Are they going to be roles? He's going to be that role player at times along the way. That's going to be what's going to throw out some sporadic scoring. So, yeah, I think you can back him in, though, if you've got him. Obviously, you're not getting rid of him, but I wouldn't be moving heaven and earth to try to grab him either, because he might just be that 80s guy.
I did look at some CBA numbers this morning. He is averaging 70% CBAs over the past 3 weeks, but 40 for the season. Now I know like there's earlier on in the season he was getting 0 type thing, but he has seen a bit of a more midfield uptick. He seems like one of their go-to guys over the last few rounds, as opposed.
Well, they've
to
had a fair shift as well, haven't they? Like, you look at a guy like a Tim Kelly, for example, where he gained his forward status DPP this week, and that's a telling thing there. He's literally lost them. He's not there much at all. I think 30% CBA type guy now.
I actually traded Hoff for Jack Graham last night because I had Sam Powell-Pepper as my F5. I do have Brent Daniels actually as my F5. Technically, he would be like my 4th or 5th best forward, but I don't know if he's coming back or not. So needed some cover. Let's move on to Ryan Angwin. 2 games so far, had a 73 and a 90. The Callan Ward wing, like I thought it was going to be, I think it's Jacob Ware is his name. I thought it was going to be his role after he went down, but it looks like Angwin's the replacement now. Are you buying in after 2 big scores? One of those was against West Coast. What do you think?
Yeah, one to watch, I guess. That's the thing. This is where you are getting deeper down the weeds, and I think GWS will be one of those teams that are going to have those shifts, those changes in who the guys are. And Angwin's put his hand up a lot too, and we just need to think about they've got a few guys that could take this role, but he's got his hand up at the moment, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Because that caused a few shifts, I think, in their midfield here as well. I just want to check Xavier O'Halloran, but he had a monster score, and he's one of those players that I talk about. No, Xavier O'Halloran didn't go in midfield, no CBAs at all. He did. Yes, he had 68%. That's a lot of CBAs. So it kind of causes shifts like that. To happen where you see a few bumps here and there from other players. So yeah, it's interesting with GWS. I just don't trust a wingman ever. Really. I put faith in Massimo D'Ambrosio this year, keeping him in my best 12, and it hasn't really paid off. I can't even field him at the moment. So, that's the moral of the story. Never trust a winger. So I'm not getting sucked in at the moment. And then Harry Ralston, only the 55 points. We've got Stephen Cornelio playing in the 2s. He's already
That's always been the flag, hasn't it?
Yeah. He's already up to 70% owned as well, I think, in a lot of leagues. So Stephen Cornelio, that is. So, I think many people are expecting him to come back in. Do you think Ralston's the one that makes way, or what do you think happens?
I think he was the simple, obvious answer for us to think that was the case. And Cogs can't be too far away. He had an 80 odd in the VFL on the weekend, so you'd think they'd want him in the side. And Ralston, he's probably been sort of used as that role player, whether that's a sub role player or whatever throughout the time. So I think he'll be an easy out if that's the way that we look at it.
Yeah, it's such a flip in 2 weeks. If you listen to Selby's podcast or whatever, it's like buy him now. He looks so good, he's going to be their inside guy, and they put in a few good performances and then you get a few players back from injury, and you're like, oh well, maybe he's not. Yeah, it's
almost
hard.
Like that. The buy resets things. A big name can reset stuff as well because you do throw that through.
100%. Onto Bombers versus Gold Coast. You guys were in the hunt for a fair bit of this, but it kind of felt like just at arm's length. Yeah,
good, smart tanking type.
Well, I've heard that rumor a bit that might be the plan, but we're not going to say that bit out loud. Isaac Kako, the first one, 79 points. It was just like I think it was his best game so far, I think. 70 disposals, 3 marks, 5 tackles and a goal in there. He's a small forward, so he's not really the guy I'd usually target, but he's quite a skillful player. And they were saying, I heard on the radio before the game that they were saying that this year they've kind of made him focus on his defensive work, and they're not letting him use his attacking flair as much this season. And I think this was a kind of like a glimpse when he can kind of attack a bit more or play a bit more, win a bit more of the footy as well. These are the kind of scores he can put up. So I'm not saying you'd ever kind of back him in to be an 80-plus average forward or anything like that, but he might be a good streamer one day, don't you think?
For sure. I think that defensive side of him is what's going to help him with any fantasy numbers, because I think he had 5 tackles on the weekend. He was pretty good there. So that's the sort of stuff that we want to get from any small forward if you are looking at that. I loved his preseason game, seeing him push up the field a lot, and that's what we might want to see from him if we are taking him seriously as a option in fantasy. But yeah, that was his first score over 55 for the year, so it was his best score, and it was the best by a fair way, really.
Yeah, maybe we can't expect it every week just yet. But yeah, maybe one for the future as a streamer.
Yeah.
Nate Caddy, 77 points. How much do you love this kid?
Oh, he's awesome. This is one of those things that you have a little bit of hope for. And again, it's almost Rewalt like the way that he can push up the field, takes marks, he backs himself to take them as well. I think that's another exciting part of it. And we'll hit the scoreboard because I reckon he'll be a leading goal kicker for the Bombers for the next decade, I reckon.
So yeah, with Nate Caddy, I guess there's that consensus out there that he's going to be that Kerno-esque key forward. I mean more so on the fact that he might not have to kick big bags to score. Last 2 weeks we've seen Kerno put up 70s and 80s without kicking goals type things. I reckon Caddy can be that kind of guy who's kind of takes big marks and works up the field and stuff like that. So yeah, could be just a pretty exciting player for the future. And I think we'll see scores like 77 points like he did on the weekend a lot more often. Onto the Suns. Joel Jeffrey, he had his tri-weekly good game. That's the way I like to look at it. Every 3 weeks he seems to pop. So luckily the guy that owns him, I'm playing him this week, so I didn't get him on the tri-weekly. But make sure you're streaming him every 3 weeks. I think that's the science behind it. The next one I'm really interested in, I basically got Braden Fiorini, for free in a trade this week as scraps. He scored 100 points on the weekend. And he auto-qualifies for Too Good for the Podcast with the 380-plus scores. I'm just not confident he's still in their best 22. But at the same time, who comes in for him? What are your thoughts on Fiorini? He's playing well enough.
We've been here before, haven't we? That's the thing about Fiorini. And we know he can score. And he's almost one of those ones you almost need that flag for on your Too Good for the Pod because of, is it really an 80 for him? Because he's that guy that can, when he's playing, we know that he can probably average 90 plus. That's what he's like as a player. So, but where does he fit? I didn't watch him close enough to sort of look at the role. I assume that he was probably still fairly outside in what he was doing because of how stacked they are and what they're rolling through there with that, because there probably is still that space and opportunity to play as that winger in the Suns lineup at the moment. Yeah,
so I watched it pretty closely. So it seemed like he would go from wing. Then it's because if you look at his heat map as well, there's a lot of touches across halfback. And then I was watching a few just quick stoppages out of the midfield. And there were times where he was starting in defense, but nowhere near enough to get DPP or anything like that. It was just that's where he would start for a second and then go back. But then he actually went into the midfield after that because his CBA numbers, if I just get them up here, they've been growing over the last few weeks as well. So he's up to, he's gone 24%, 26%, 22. So he's kind of like that chop out in there. So I think what's kind of happening is he kind of rests, one or two centre bounces in a different spot or out in the wing, and then he goes in, then goes to the bench after that. So, it's an interesting one. I'm not sure if I'd trust it, but looking at the reserves, the only players that are going, in terms of midfielders, you've got David Swallow and Leo Lombard had their kind of biggest games on the weekend. And after that, there's not a lot else that you would actually roll through that midfield. I think the big one, I can't remember which is the midfield. Is it Will Graham or Caleb Graham, the one that was playing forward a lot of the start of this season? One of the Grahams.
Yeah.
I think it was Will Graham.
Yeah.
He's still 4 to 6 away. So I reckon that's the kind of spot he's kind of taken over. And he might hold it for a while as they head into finals. So I don't know. Fiorini could be a sneaky good pickup, I think. What do you reckon?
Yep. It could be, yep, and you're probably doing it for this year, and hopefully he can sit in there and not rely on him to be there for next season.
I have definitely not factored him into my 12 keepers, that's for sure. Ned Moyle had the 90 points, just proving he'll be a good scorer when Witts retires, I think. It was an easier ruck matchup, but I think we've seen enough now from big Ned Moyle that he could be he's going to be a good scorer, and he's the next man in.
Well done if you got the handcuff there because, you're laughing, I reckon.
Yeah, got the succession plan. Get Ethan Reid for the next one and you're good. Yep. Bailey Humphries the next one. 75 points. He's just finding some consistency finally. Yeah. He also, I think he got subbed out of the game at 3/4 time on 68 last week as well. So he probably would have had an 80 or so last week. He's starting forward, but obviously rolling into the midfield. And I just don't see that, role changing. And he actually dropped out of the centre bounces a little bit this week, but then kind of hit the scoreboard a bit more as well. So I don't know. I think he could be really fantasy relevant as a forward for the future, don't you think?
He can be. And it'll be the thing as Took maybe switches roles with him. That might be where those two sort of work in unison, because they're CBAs. If you look at those across the time, there's a little bit of a correlation with those guys switching in and out. I would say maybe they've got the little circles next to them on the magnet board for the coach where they are the changes.
Yeah, you just got to be hopeful that he does enough forward time to actually, hold his forward status for the future.
Yeah.
But I think he will. I think we'll have him for a while, I think. And then Sam Flanders, speaking of, midfielders with forward status, 73 points. He doubled his CBAs this week. He went from 1 to 2. But starting forward, rolling, I just feel like he's rolling more, like playing higher, rolling further up the ground than he was in previous weeks. And I think he's just built up a bit of fitness. And I think we're just all waiting for forward status next season, I think, is the big thing with him.
And that's the thing for the eye, isn't it? That's what he's doing, playing half forward, rolling into the midfield, being at stoppage, and that's what we want from him. And with the classic hat on, like, he got himself nice and cheap because he was coming in off that back injury from the preseason, slow start, and now he's actually, fitness is there and he's getting it happening. So a nice one. I reckon in most leagues he's been a long hold for people, because if you had him, you weren't going to be ditching him. But next year should have that forward status, and he'll be one of our high targets, I guess, in season-long draft, and obviously classic as well.
Yeah, definitely. Price. And I think those, like, the people that own him are just like, as long as you're not contending or weren't contending this year, you're pretty happy that, this has kind of happened. So you've got yourself a top forward. Yeah. On to the Geelong versus Richmond game. Jack Martin, 107 points. Last few weeks he's playing on the wing, back in the halfback last week, taking kick-ins, doing everything back there. And it's actually a role that really suits him when you think about the type of player he is and, what he was drafted as. He was meant to be like the next big thing when he was drafted, and he was a midfielder back in the day and then played as a small forward. But he kind of suits the role quite well. He'll probably lose the forward status next year. So is he still valuable in keeper leagues, or... here's a case point, I guess. Like, the guys bottom of our league, we have a mid-season draft, our final kind of ad drop next week. And would it make sense to pick him up if you're a rebuilding team and he's going to lose forward status? Or, would you be trading that pick away to a contender that might need him as a forward? What do you think?
Maybe not in that case. If you're contending, it'd be a nice one to be floating there. But if you're rebuilding, it is a tricky one, because you probably will lose that forward status. And what can some of these scores be like at Geelong is one thing, being at the Cats, but also just how many they've got. That's the other side. You've got your Humphreys, you've got your Guthries, all those guys are there still getting some of the peel. And that was a matchup which was a dream sort of thing for him too.
Yeah, it was like, if you looked at all the, the defence versus position and all that sort of stuff, Richmond do give up a stack of points. And that's kind of why I knew the Zach Guthrie 125 was coming my way this week, and I can't really complain too much about it. But I think a really good pickup for contending teams, if you can get your hands on him, or, I think off the waivers, he's probably been snapped up by now. But in some leagues, he might just be completely not drafted, because I know he was in our league, and that was the case. So... like, he could be there next year, but it might not be as nice if he doesn't have that forward status. And then George Stevens had the 84 points. We've seen this in the past with Closey from Geelong as well, that, like, when Baz is out, they just brought like a rookie in and just chucked him straight in the guts. I think, in fairness, it's been two really good matchups to actually do that with them. But he was like, Stevens was actually one I was pretty high on in the draft a couple of years ago. Because he averaged 100 in the talent league, and then 87 at the under 18 level in the reduced kind of formats there. So always been a good fantasy scorer, and he's been performed pretty well at VFL level as well. But he slipped in the draft, so I was kind of like thought he might be a player that might not make it, but got his kind of game this year and scored 84 points. What do you think happens next week with Baz coming straight back in? You probably see him straight out, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. And the thing is, he came in as a late inclusion on the Friday. That was for Tyson Stengel. So, there's probably every chance that he may have even been sub going into this if Baz then wasn't out. So
Geelong would have known what they were doing at the time, though. They knew what was happening.
100%. So, essentially they had two laid outs, which they all probably knew about all week. Anyway, it's a tricky one. If you're nice and deep and you can stash, cool. But if not, I think that it still might be a little bit more time, because was this season 2 for him or season 3?
I think it's season 2. Yeah.
2, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, again, nice matchup, and circumstances were good. It's just like he's the most requested player off the waivers this week. And I think that might, especially in single season leagues, it might be a bit premature, that's all. And then just kind of Reece Stanley's 106 kind of just proves he stream rucks against Nank because he scores by himself, but he also gives them away too. We'll tip the cap to Ryan Mansell, who had 108 points and 3 goals, and Maurice Rioli Jr., 98 points, 9 marks, 1 goal. I have no interest in picking up either of those guys.
Off the sub.
Yeah, that's right. Came off the bench and put up a monster. Yeah. Brisbane versus Port Adelaide. Not a lot of big scores for either team. Zach Bailey with 107 points, but that came off the back of 5 goals. He's such a borderline player. Yeah, such a borderline player every year. Like, do I keep him? Do I drop him? Do I draft him? You know, that sort of stuff. He's a tricky one, so not reading into that one too much. I think if you're a Jordan Sweet owner, you're pretty happy though, right?
Oh, well, you need to be now. So Vicentini, what was that in the first quarter? He hurt himself. So
yeah, and out for the season now.
Roll through with that now. It's handy.
Yeah, 97 points without Vicentini. So Jordan Sweet owners will be very happy with that. Travis Boak had 94 points. Like, he keeps putting up good scores, but like his touches just aren't damaging anymore for Port Adelaide. And I guess now with 3 injuries, it's hard to see him coming out of the side. But he also looks like he's running quicksand half the time as well. Like, if I owned him, I'd just be worried he'd be on the outer or get rested or something like that, don't you?
Yep, exactly. That's where we're at now, I guess, with Bokey.
Yeah. He's a good player to have as your F5, though. You'd probably take that when he's playing, but yeah, it's a bit risky. And then Jack Lukosia's 80 points, 3 goals, first game back into the side. It's a pretty good return. I wouldn't trust it long term, but he does play that higher half forward role that, you know, allows him to get a few extra marks and stuff like that. And he plays West Coast this week as well, so like he might be a good pick up and stream this week, I think.
That's what he's about. He can mark. That's the thing that you do like. And, yeah, the way that he played up at the Gabba, I think you saw him, you know, probably didn't spend a heap of time inside 50 as such.
Yeah, no, that's it. You're right. Like, because he's taken, like, most of his marks and stuff came outside 50 and stuff like that. So I reckon he can continue to do that for at least another week. Moving on to the next game, St Kilda versus Hawthorn. Max Hall, I didn't see this game, where the back-to-back games we were just complaining about before, but 124 points. Apparently, it was just everywhere. Kicked 3 goals. Someone on Twitter was saying he was playing more in the midfield, but I looked at the CBAs and there was 0. But maybe it was just rolling up like more, like into the contest and that sort of stuff as well. But he's had back-to-back big weeks. Like, is there anything that you can see that points to an increased scoring with him, like any role shifts or anything like that? I can't pick it.
No, I haven't watched him hard enough. It's almost like a lot of these players, like Maxwell, who was a good cash cow early in Classic, you sort of forget about him once they've done their job, because he's had some pretty awful scores too over the last
100%.
few weeks as well. So it's not like it's something we see as a trend going on there, but he does get busy. Like, that's one thing. Like, I think he can score in patches. He's one of those sorts of players as well, which I guess we can see from those half forwards or the outside players at times do that. Yeah,
well, he had 50 at quarter time last week, and he was absolutely burying me. I might get a chance to watch him this week. He plays Sunday. Actually, no, I'll probably go to the Port game, so I'll probably miss him again this week. So I'll have to get the listeners out there to keep an eye on him for me, because I haven't seen him too closely recently. Then Windhager, 114 points. He's kind of like, you put him in the category of those players that are there every week and score okay every week, but they're never going to be too good for the podcast. They kind of just
depends on his role.
Yeah, exactly.
He wasn't tagging this week, so
yeah.
And then
I think
this week, does he
I think it's more about Yeah, I think it's more about St Kilda, like, as well. Like, they had 600 plus scorers. Like, do you think they're just trying things and they've given up a bit, or what?
Yeah, they could be, and Marvel Stadium's a factor that you might have in that as well. Like, they can do that. Yeah, I think because he was probably playing wing outside, that sort of thing, and that's where some of the ball was.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one, but maybe Saints, there might be a bit of a watch over the last few weeks if you can target a few players to stream and stuff like that, if they're just going to play that style of game and score really well with each other, and yeah, hopefully it goes all right. Jarman Impey, 100 points. Just want to give myself a bit of a pat on the back. He was my streamer of the week this week. So easy matchup versus St Kilda. So, look for those general and halfback rebounding defenders, that sort of stuff, to score well against them. Massimo D'Ambrosio finally had a good score, but again, like I said before, St Kilda just were a really easy matchup for outside players. But poor Massimo is back to the podcast this season. I think on the back of his scoring, like Harry Morrison got 80 as well. So like again, just the moral of the story is just play those outside types against St Kilda
and Hawthorn. They're a bit of a fantasy graveyard at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, there's not a lot going on, is there? Like, there's a few disappointing scorers. I think the only one that's kind of relevant that from this game is Josh Battle, 88 points. Like, and I think that comes down to St Kilda as well because they don't have those monster tall forwards, so it allows someone like Battle just to take a heap of marks. 7
and
marks.
Revenge game factor too.
True. Yeah, that's right. Didn't even think of that. So that's how quickly you forget where they're
the
from.
Upside on revenge game. That's an outlier, like a Richmond matchup. Revenge game can also be a little outlier.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's tips from the pros. You don't get that anywhere else. City versus Fremantle on the Sunday. Like Callum Mills. He's, I guess, probably too good for the podcast, but because of his averages so low, he hasn't kind of done the qualification yet. But I think the midfield height for him's over, right? He's going to be the halfback. Yeah, it's going to be the halfback flanker. Do you think he'll find more consistency there? Because he is fluctuating at the moment.
He can, and their sort of changes this week were interesting too. They had Matt Roberts as the sub. Riley Bice hasn't been in the side for a couple of weeks now as well. Lloyd up on that wing after coming back in. So, but he's looked settled, and that's what his role has looked like. So I think that's going to be there. He was sort of probably took the most kick-ins without looking at the stats for that. I noticed him doing that a little bit there, and but he's got that ability to push up the ground a little bit, but he was the first man back as well. So I think that's where his role's going to be. That midfield's way too stacked now, isn't it? I think that's a big part of it for Sydney as well.
Yeah. And I don't know, I find the SCG just a frustrating ground for fantasy players, especially the midfielders against them just get so clogged up, like your Brayshaw's so wrong. Yeah. And there's just no room for anyone to move for that chip mark type thing and 2 kicks you down the field type thing. But Sydney kind of slow it down a lot themselves. Like they stop and wait for everyone to flood back, and it just kind of creates that kind of scrap on the G as well, which is it just sucks. But, Callum Mills, because he was in the defensive kind of half, it works well for him. So I probably have more faith for him when he's playing at home too. Onto the Freo side of things, Corey Wagner, 107 points. He's done a bit of everything this year. Started on the halfback line, then he's gone into a tagger, then he was kind of like a forward mid role this week. If you own him as a defender, you'd be pretty happy with his output this season, as like a streamer type.
Exactly, and I guess role for him too. Like he started off doing a bit of time on, who was he on? My brain's really
he started on Goulden, I reckon.
Goulden, Goulden to start with, and then was able to do his thing, which I think that's where we've seen his scores sort of rack up, not just from when he's been able to get off the chain from his tag as such, and that's that might be where that is. So good with the defender status because he can tackle and he can find a way to build his score. Yeah,
no, a few people have targeted him as like their bench defender or their D5 this season. He's kind of been a pretty handy prospect. The Nathan O'Driscoll finally put up a good score since returning. Started the year like a house on fire, but then got injured and then went missing for a bit. I just don't think that role is going to be, like I said, never trust a winger. He's kind of one of them as well. And I think earlier in the season we saw him go to centre bounce attendances and stuff like that, but now with even Young out, it's still not happening. So I don't think it's going to be happening long term. So
I think Sarong was doing a little bit of forward time and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, now he's just sort of planted out there on that wing.
Yeah, definitely. And then on to the last game of the weekend, Adelaide versus Melbourne. Dan Curtin, I had him as one of my streamers, but he didn't come up for me this week. Yeah. And I guess that kind of just goes to show
he's been good.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, he'll continue his breakout form. And this was actually a really easy matchup as well, Melbourne for wingers and guys playing out there. So, it just didn't come on. So I guess it's just the nature of a second-year player who'll fluctuate. I go from 1 week where I really trust that he's going to be going to live up to the hype that everyone says. And then I'll go to a week like this where I'm a bit uncertain. But I think as long as we see a bit more consistency over the next few weeks and a few more good scores, I think we can back him in long term. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I like him. He's a great player. It's almost he's come on this season, which is nice. Again, a marker. He's a big lad. That's one of the things that probably surprise you about him when you do see him. I have got to watch him live once, but he just looks so much bigger than what he sort of plays at times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, he was drafted as a key defender, and that was my knock on him, because I thought like that's where he'd end up, because good key defenders don't grow on trees, you know.
No.
But they seem adamant.
He's anything but, isn't he?
Yeah,
anything
they
but
seem
that
adamant
for the Crows.
to play him in the role in the outside role at the moment, and kind of float forward and back. So if he does it, could be a good scorer. And then Disco Turner, 84 points. I've really enjoyed him over the last few weeks. Kind of just sits in that hole in defence, and it kind of worked against the Crows yesterday with their 3 tall targets. Like, he was just in the hole. Like, actually, they kind of all were at times, but he ended up getting on the end of 16 marks in that game. And
crazy.
He's done it in multiple games now, where he's taken kind of 8, 9, 10 marks sitting back there. So, and looking at his scoring, like, since he's come into the side on a permanent basis, he was kind of like in and out of the side up until round 8. He's put up 670 plus scores from 9 games. So 6 out of 9 games, he's gone over 70 since being a permanent fixture in the side. I think you take that every day of the week from a guy like Disco Turner.
Exactly. They can't be looking at him as a forward, but I guess that's always a little bit of a worry that sometimes they do need to flick him there, but he hasn't had to for a while, and that should be where he should be.
Yeah, and just works so well in between Lever and May as well. Like, they can kind of do the big body stuff, and he can kind of float in. So no, it might be an option in drafts. He might be pushed up the draft boards.
16 marks, crazy numbers.
Yeah, it is. And then last one to mention is Cade Chandler, 82 points. Just starting on the wing a lot more this season, then floats into that half forward role from there, just kind of up and down one side of the ground. So probably just a tip of the cap, but does have the forward status. Just got to hope he doesn't play too much on the wing to lose it, but I don't think that's the case at the moment. So that's the round review done. We might just get into a few questions if that's cool with you, Warnie, then we'll wrap it up. First one comes from Robbie Thorogood. First in his league was 16 keepers. Should I trade Bailey Humphrey for Liam Baker, Graham Myers, and a round 1 pick? What would you be doing in that situation?
Oh, so just Humphrey out for those guys.
Yeah, so he gets 3 or 2 in and a pick for one player if in his top of the ladder.
Especially when Graham Myers is there too. Yeah. He can take you to the promised land. They've got a good run to finish the year off, and obviously a draft. That's almost a bit of daylight robbery in my opinion.
I'm taking that every day of the week. If that was me, where I'm sitting right now, and I was offered those 3 things,
done.
Take that, tick it off,
and do it as quick as you can before they get to rethink that one.
And that's the thing. Like, I find across like the Discord and the community, especially in keeper leagues, and especially in keeper leagues that are like relatively fresh, like first 3 or 4 years in, they kind of haven't worked out yet that points on the board matters way more, like in the current season, kind of matters a bit more than, future seasons, because it's so, a role change or an injury or something like that can just completely ruin everything going forward. And the amount of guys, ours has been going for almost 15 years now. Like, the amount of guys you draft going, this guy's going to be a star one day, and you hold on to him for 3 or 4 years, like, just never gets there. So you just got to jump
Robbie,
on.
if you don't win that by trading out Humphrey and getting Graham Myers in, I reckon that's just a win of a trade, let alone you getting a round 1 draft pick for next year.
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
So
huge.
No,
nice.
Take it, run. Matt Roach wants to know what's gone wrong with Lawson Humphreys. Haven't watched Geelong closely for the last 2 weeks. What do you think's happening there?
Is it the bodies? And we just talked earlier about Martin, him having a bit of a stint there, but they've just I think it's going to be who pops their head up week to week at times. That's a little bit what that might feel like, but it is a pretty awful score. He put up at 49 on the weekend. So
especially against Richmond, you'd be hoping for a big one there. I think as well, like earlier in the season when he was scoring really well, Tom Stewart was kind of in and out a lot as well. And it's just, there was one less body to contend with. Now you got Martin as well. It's probably just pushed him down the pecking order a little bit. So I think that's probably got more to do with anything. I'm still sticking with him long term though. The kid is absolutely class. So you got to stick with him. Anonymous wants to know, I own the Hawks B grade midfield. He's got Cam McKenzie, Massimo D'Ambrosi, and Warple. Rank 1 to 3. So I'm assuming like he means like overall and keeper status, so for the future as well. How would you be ranking those guys?
Well, you've told me don't even talk about Massimo D'Ambrosio. Cam McKenzie feels like he's the one that the hope's there for it.
Yeah.
But I'd probably just revert back to Warple, even though I worry about what his future could be.
Yeah.
And that's the worry about. I think McKenzie's probably the safest guy out of that list because I think he should should be right and should be part of it. Warple is such a whipping boy at times, isn't he?
Well, I'm kind of with you on Warple though a bit because like I think we'll probably
he's the fantasy guy.
Yeah. We'll probably see him at Geelong next year is the rumour.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And like he just might
actually I have heard that, yeah.
Might be a bit more time on ground as a result. I think long term, like if you're going to be looking in 5 years' time, Cam McKenzie's probably going to be the best scorer out of the three. But in the short term, Warple might have some value there as well. So let's just go Cam McKenzie, Warple, then D'Ambrosio, I think. But then I think if you're thinking short term, you could flip McKenzie and Warple, I reckon.
That's right.
I just reckon you might have a big year. Like we've seen him be such a fantasy pig in the past, especially in his like early days. If he just kind of doesn't have to be a role player like he is at Hawthorn and kind of just gets a bit more freedom at a new club, and whether that's Geelong, even though they're stacked with Smith and Atkins already in there and that sort of stuff. Like, I don't know, there's just something there that there might be that new club bump for him there in the short term.
Kyle Oakley, they want him, he's got to be good, I reckon.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing it for a reason.
Kyle Oakley wants to know how deep is the draft pool for next year's fantasy. In all honesty, I have not looked into it just yet, but it is something that I will. It's the type of thing I get to in the next few weeks where I start scraping numbers and having a look at players and watching highlights and stuff like that. So, yep, stay tuned for that, Kyle. I'll get some stuff out eventually. Simon Evans _76. Where do we see Philippu's trade value for a keeper over the off-season, assuming he still struggles to get back on the park this year and doesn't show us anything like the end of 2024? How are you rating Philippu as future prospects?
Well, I think if the forward status should still be there, so that's probably the first little tick, I guess. It'll be so much about what his pre-season looks like, getting a full pre-season. I think they're the things that we'll be looking at. They've been interesting. Like even when he's been in, I think the second game back, he had a fair crack at trying to make him giving him a run in the midfield, but then they worked out that his tank wasn't there off the back of the limited pre-season. So, yeah, I think there's some value there. I think you'd need to find the right coach that, if you were talking about trade value for him, you'd need to find the right coach that does see that upside, because last year he did finish bloody tremendously well. Like he was the hot name up until that injury in the preseason.
Yeah, he's actually given us a rating scale here. Simon has high or still high after preseason, dented somewhat but still high, or in the toilet. Where do you put him?
Oh, it's probably the dented somewhat, but still high, because I think there will still be some believers out there. As a classic owner, I'm not a believer anymore, so he's probably in the toilet for me.
Yeah,
but,
no, I think
I had him for 2 points on field, which really sucked.
Oh, fair enough. You've been scarred
with that calf injury. When they said all week that he had a little bit of a niggle, but then played. Oh man, terrible.
Well, for me, like top 10 draft pick. We've seen fantasy pedigree all the way through. Like we saw it in his junior numbers. Then we saw him actually get a run in the midfield and do it at AFL level for a good patch last year. I'm still high on him. I think you just got to be patient, wait for next year, let him get all over all his issues and whatever, and reset and go from there. Huge Ass AFL wants to know, will Tristan Cherry bounce back next year? And will LDU ever reach the fantasy heights we thought he would have by now? As a Cherry owner, I'm kind of not losing faith. I still think he's going to be around the 100 average kind of ruck. It's more that we might not see those huge 150s, 160s that we saw last year. And I put it purely down to like, if you watch him, he seems to try to use the hit outs a lot more than he used to actually take it out the ruck. And with North Melbourne as well, the other thing is we're not getting as many like repeat stoppages like against Carlton, I think it was the other week. It just like there was just no ball ups and no opportunities for him to actually score. And I'm not sure if that was to do with like two spud sides kind of just pinging it back and forth all day. But I feel like we're just not seeing as many repeat stoppages for North Melbourne as a whole. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just looking at pure numbers too. Like it's just been very disappointing. He hasn't hit what we loved about him. Still feels like he's out there throwing his weight around and tackling, but it's not that sort of the stoppage is probably what you might put it down to, as simple as that, because hit out numbers still look about normal, but it's just these scores. So the last 4 weeks, 96, obviously injured there towards the end, so it might have been a ton, but a low ton, 93, 84, 93 against some opponents where points have flown.
Yeah.
even the West Coast game, he had 111. Like that should have or could have been a monster with what we've seen against those guys. So yeah,
yeah, he was double teamed in a few games, but I guess everyone's getting double teamed at West Coast. I think Carlton brought Pitnet back in just for him.
It might even be something to think about for next year too. If we get rid of the sub, thankfully, and we likely go to the 5 on the bench, it's probably going to bring in more dual ruck setups, I think.
Yeah. So maybe, there'll be more around that do bring their numbers down. But yeah, with Cherry, I just think like they're not, like it used to be just like stoppage tackle, and it'd just be like ticking up those +4s. They're just not happening this year. And, maybe it's partly because North Melbourne are actually just trying to win the ball out of the midfield instead of just trying to, reduce damage and trying to, progress their game plan to that next level or whatever. Or maybe they're just not as effective and the other teams kind of, maybe they've gotten worse and the other team's actually taken it. But that's what I'm putting it down to, but I haven't put my finger on as to why that's happening type thing. But anyways, last question comes from Major Van Bam. Who would you take out of these three? Would you take Wagner as a tagger, Harley as a mid, or Angwin as a mid from here on in? So I'm assuming he means for the rest of this season, because surely you take Harley Reid out of all those three. So what do you reckon for the rest of the season?
Yeah, Harley, and even for the future too.
Yeah,
I think Harley's the one, isn't he? Like saying Harley's a mid, because this is a really bad thing. Did he pick up defender status this year?
Harley Reid? I don't think so.
Did I dream that?
No, I don't think so.
That could have been one of these stupid fantasy dreams that I keep having.
God, it has been a long season, hasn't it?
It no, yeah. So he has got defender status in fantasy. No, I didn't dream that one.
No,
so
right. Did that happen this week, did it? Or
no, mustn't have done.
Crazy. I did not know that. Anyway.
He must have had that earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and I guess that's the thing on that question by saying it, Harley is a mid, like for the future. I think it's just Harley Reid. I think you just have to go there, especially when he's racking up a shite load for the Bombers.
Yeah. What does he put? 97, 53, 91, 75, 73. Is like 3. But yeah, for the future, you're right. Like, yeah, that one. I could see a case for Wagner having that defender status, for the rest of the season, but you've got Harley Reid that you can put in defender status as well. So yeah, doesn't matter. Honestly, did not realize he got defender status. But anyway, I'm
just wondering where that was. I'm just going to have a look here and see when it was.
I don't own him in any league, so in any shape or format. So probably explains why. Anyways, we might wrap it up there. Anything you want to plug, Warnie? No live shows or anything this year? That's the game?
No, just having a quiet year. This is our school holidays at the moment too. Yep. Normally this is when we might try to do something, but having a quiet one, because next year will be 20 years of DT Talk. Oh. So that's going to be huge. So we'll have our world tour, as Calvin wants to call it, because he wants to do a end of season trip in Bali.
Okay.
Which can make it the world tour. So that's what it is. Well, yeah, don't know. Just all the regular stuff, the trader stuff. Our Patreon is lots of fun. Roy copped 10 tennis balls to the arse last night.
Did see that, yes.
Green vest punishment, the poor fella. So
yeah,
we'll keep kicking along that. 7 weeks to go.
Yep, let's keep ticking along. Get around us at Keeper League Pod on all the socials or keeperleaguepod.com.au. If it's within your means to do so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a member. If you get value out of any of the info that we provide, the resources, or just getting this podcast in your feed each week, if you want to give back, and you can, please sign up as a member. And also make sure you join our Discord server. I think we're over 500, getting close to 600 members of that. And I get 1 million notifications per day. So there's always some chat going on about fantasy in that Discord as well. So make sure you get around that and get amongst the community. Anyways, thanks again, Warnie. Thanks to the listeners, and we'll talk to everyone next week. See ya.